Hello. Hi, everyone. Late. I can see you all. So a very warm welcome to all of you to this 13th session of our virtual weekly teachings by Geshe Lhakdor. And it's very cold here, but really how heartwarming to see you all here. And Geshe Lhakdor, we are very delightful. I'm very delighted, very fortunate that you have come for the last 13 sessions and you have taught us and you continue to do so. So Geshe Lhakdor, thank you so much, first of all. And please start enlightening us. Thank you.
FURHHDL. Let me first recite one short shloka by Shantideva, which says, "May those with fear be fearless. May those under bondage be freed. May those powerless be empowered. May our hearts join in friendship." Similarly, there's another verse, probably by Nagarjuna, where he says, "Before the fear comes, fearful comes. That time you should develop fear. When the fear has actually come, then stay fearless." Very, very wise, because for the afflictions that we might get from negative emotions, before we become the victim of negative emotions or pandemics or anything, we should have fear, which means we should be watchful. In the case of this pandemic, hand sanitization, wearing the mask and things like that. So we have to have that fear and be cautious. So all these Dharma spiritual teachings are to teach us how to remain cautious, alert. Our being stuck in the samsara itself is enough not to remain relaxed and without thinking, we need to really, really be watchful. We call it in the prison of samsara. So how can you relax in the prison of samsara? And whether it's a pandemic from virus or any other pandemic of negative emotions or friends or food, or there's so many types of pandemics. All this is primarily related to our mind, how we perceive things. Many a times we die before the actual death, out of lack of knowledge, ignorance, and out of suspicion and fear. Imagine hundreds and thousands of people are suffering because of rumors, misinformation, and lack of love, care, and so forth. So therefore, many of these difficult prevailing situations, it's not just this pandemic, but there are so many other problems. All these problems can be greatly minimized if we all remain watchful and make concerted effort towards ameliorating the situations of everybody with loving kindness. Therefore, in today's session, we are going to talk a little bit about the 12 links of dependent origination. As I told you earlier, that this chapter is a really, really long chapter. But of course, I'm not trying to go into the details that is found in the chapter. Hopefully, you can read these details later on, because there are so many mixtures of, miraculous performances, emanations, teachings. It's really like watching a, big movie, Mahabharata or something like that. So there is not much point for all of us to try to explain many of these things, because for many of us, it may not be even easy to accept these miraculous performances. But anyway, the core of the teaching of this, chapter is the teaching on 12 links of dependent origination, and especially discarding attachment, as we already read in that one verse we already read. The focus is how to remove attachment. Now, if we here, in this case, if we look carefully with this attachment, although in the cycle of existence and also in the illustration of the wheel of life, Bhava Chakra, there's this depiction in the very center of the three poisons. And there the ignorance symbolized by a pig is said to be the fundamental source for all other negative emotions. That is absolutely true, of course. But one which really plays a very, very predominant role in bringing all the miseries and sufferings in this world is attachment or greed. And it is because of this attachment, and of course, based on the ignorance, we want to just venture out and say, I want this, I want that. And then you have so much obsession with everything that comes within the purview of your five senses. Knowing this well, the clever business people, they come up with all these beautiful looking gadgets and objects, which is really flooding the market. Imagine, it's a big area to think about. And because of our greed, obsession, and wish to have more than what we really need, we become not only the victim of the attachment, but also the victim of these marketeers, these business people. They can, stupid as we are, because of our, gullibility, they can advise and advertise and sell anything, really, honestly speaking. I mean, I cannot help but laugh when I see all these advertisements. And I'm compelled to think how many people are fooled by these advertisements. Use this Lux soap and tomorrow you will shine out. Use this particular cream and you will become Snow White and all those things, And I mean, the endless advertisers are there. That means they're able to sell this, and it means there are people who follow this. So it shows clearly how much we have the capacity to think for ourselves and judge what we need and what we don't need. So therefore, all these teachings are basically saying, look, there is a reality, and then there is appearance, and the appearances are deceptive. So don't just run after appearances, how seemingly beautiful and attractive things may be, but that is just the superficial, external outlook. There is really not much substance if you peel it out. So therefore, take time to see the reality. That is what this topic on emptiness means. Emptiness means reality. And Buddha very clearly said, whether the Buddhas come or not come, the ultimate nature of everything is emptiness. And I had earlier explained that emptiness is not something that is found in a sacred scripture, But emptiness is there out in the rocks and the forest is the nature of the trees, the nature of the rocks, the nature of water and birds, the ultimate nature of everything that is conceivable and everything that is existent is emptiness. That things exist by depending on complex interplay of causes and conditions. So it's really like that beautiful things that you see on a, that is the best, example. So it's really like a beautiful picture that you see on the screen. Yes, you are able to see it. The other day I've explained this by the example of a rainbow. However may attractive and beautiful the rainbow or the picture that you see on the screen, very superficially it looks attractive, but really it's hollow. There's nothing there. So everything that is existent, the nature is like that. But because we don't take time to sit down, reflect, hear, think, and meditate, and especially develop personal experience on this ultimate reality, therefore, despite majority of us, unfortunately, don't have access to any of these teachings, so they are in a different world, majority I'm saying. So the small amount of people who show some interest and who call themselves Buddhists or whatever, they get some idea, they attend some of the teachings, sessions, just like we are attending this session. And they might even get some inspiration and start thinking, yes, this is true, this is true, this is true. But when it comes to implementing and living the life, they continue with the same old die-hard habit. Day before yesterday, a young monk from Depung called me saying that how come that there are many Buddhist monks who have studied extensively, but in terms of the negative emotions, in terms of the behavior, there is hardly any noticeable change. So how come, this young monk, since a long time, he is just chasing me, asking all questions. So he asked me, how come, why this is so? And he also said that since the core idea of Buddhist teaching is to become a good man, so why don't we just straightforward, in a straightforward way, become a good person without having to spend so much time mugging up and reading all these voluminous scriptures, which is a very pertinent, question. So I answered by saying that if you read the Buddha's many teachings, especially this verse, which condenses the essence of all the Buddha's teachings, where Buddha said, do not do anything that is harmful, do everything that is positive, completely train your mind. This is my teaching. So I explained this by saying he did not just say, don't do anything that's negative and do everything that is positive. He did not stop there. He stated in the third line, completely transform your mind or train your mind. That means you can't just become good by thinking, yes, from tomorrow onwards, I'll be a nice person. No, you can't do this. The only way, unfortunately, there is no shortcut. There is no push button enlightenment. The only way is to understand the destructiveness of this negative emotion, then implement it and gradually reduce the intensity of these negative emotions and relax the hold of these negative emotions on us. So it's only this way that we can eradicate these negative emotions. Now the problem with even people who have a lot of study, a lot of knowledge are unable to fight with these negative emotions. There are manifold. There are many reasons for that. One, the very method of studying may be just like studying mathematics in a university, If you study mathematics in a university, it has nothing to do with removing anger, jealousy, and things like that. So just like going to any college, if you also read and mug up and know all the questions and answers and definitions and divisions explained in the Buddhist text, but do not relate it to your mind, how can these teachings help you? It's impossible. In the very beginning of the Lamrim Chemo teaching, Tsongkhapa says that when you read the text, it should be like you're looking, you're looking in a mirror. The purpose of your looking in a mirror is to see whether there are any blemishes or spots, darts on your face. And when you see that dirt on your face, You just can't go away by saying, oh, there is this dirt and do nothing. The very reason of looking at that mirror is to find out that spot, dark spot, that blemish, and remove it, clean it. So similarly, see the scriptures like a mirror, and when it talks about these negative emotions, then you need to point it to yourself. Do I have these negative emotions which the text is mentioning? When it talks about compassion, you need to see, do I have that compassion which the text is mentioning? When you don't have that, then you must take a measure, you must make an effort to cultivate those positive emotions and reduce and eliminate negative emotions. So if we do that, again, there is, of course, no push button enlightenment, but then at least you are moving towards the right process of practice, and you can definitely reduce your attachment, anger, ignorance, jealousy, and so forth. A very convincing example that's given in Arya, there was 400 verses, is he says, just as to your enemy, you don't develop attachment. Why don't you develop attachment to your enemy? Because you see all the faults, you see all the shortcomings of that person, so you don't develop attachment. But you develop attachment to your friends and relatives and things like that because you highlight, number one, you like them, and because of your liking, you might even exaggerate those qualities, right? And then the problem is you get obsessed with it. So therefore, many of the Buddhist teachings, they say that don't develop obsession or attachment, even with shunyata, emptiness, even with nirvana, even with Buddha, even with His Holiness Dalai Lama. You see, for us, it's very difficult to make this distinction. Having pure, genuine, unmixed kind of reverence and respect and attachment. I've seen many people, they keep on talking about my teacher, he's so good. There, there's a little bit mixed with attachment, you see. Just like marriage, my husband, because you are related to that teacher, that husband, then you keep on highlighting. Not so much because that person, you really see that quality. Sometimes because you have linked yourself to that person. So just like any other possession, you tend to talk about the glory of that person, that object, things like that. So we need to be very, sure that you are able to make distinction between pure love and attachment. It's very, very important. So therefore, the first, one of the most important step to reduce attachment is to see to get a complete picture of that object. Yes, that object has some good qualities, but there are many shortcomings also, right? So when you see the shortcomings, your body or anything, then that will help you to be realistic and refrain from developing unnecessary attachment. One of my Buddhist friend who's a very good practitioner and scholar, he was giving a talk sometime last year, I think last year or year before, at the library. So he gave this example of how attachment brings problem. For example, he gives the example of somebody finding a suitcase at the airport or something and nobody there. Then he immediately picks up that suitcase or bag, not even knowing what is there inside the bag. And he already developed that attachment, so he will try to get hold of it and he will make sure that it is not snatched by other person, things like that. But there's no understanding at all what is there in the bag, right? So then gradually, if we discover there's gold and silver in that bag, of course, he will develop more attachment. But contrarily, it's also possible that bag might contain explosive, right? So in that case, it could even cost his life. Forget about getting any benefit. So similarly, our attachment to our body is really like that. We have no idea what is in store for us with this body, what benefit you can get, what problem you can get, you see. The very fact that we are so susceptible and subjected to all kinds of illnesses is because the body itself, the nature of the body itself is like that. The so-called peace and happiness primarily comes from outside. The so-called suffering primarily comes from the body itself. The environmental situation also contributes a little bit, but primarily the body itself is such that it's fragile. So therefore, there is a need to understand that and develop extra caution and precaution to protect even this body, not just for survival, but to be able to do, things that would bring peace and happiness for everybody, for all sentient beings, or at least to some sentient beings. So that's very important. So therefore, in the center of that wheel of life, there is this defection of these three animals. So I'll read a little bit from this text where he explains these three animals. And he says, in the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance is represented by a blind old person. The illustration is perfect because just the blind old person is unable to see anything like the external colors and shapes and good things and bad things, even though there are countless varieties of objects and things, but because of his or her blindness, he will not be able to see anything. So similarly, when we have this ignorance, we are not able to see anything. In the sense, not only we develop this grasping, seeing things as having independent existence, but because of this misconception, because of this ignorance, we are unable to make distinction between what is good, what is bad, what is necessary for you, what is necessary for others. Countless ignorances are there. And because of this countless ignorances, which is like pitfalls, we get stuck. Just like a blind person can fall, not only not able to see the colors and shapes and forms and things like that, but that person can also, because of his blindness, he might fall, he might trip, right? And because of his blindness, people may also ignore him or her. And because of your own shortcoming, that your eyesight is not good, because of that you get frustrated, and you might also get angry with other people. So in this way, you destroy others, destroy yourself. And whatever you do, because of ignorance, you do it wrongly. The fact that we are stuck in this samsara for a long time is because of this ignorance, and because we don't have the wisdom, the eye of the wisdom eye. And because we don't have the wisdom eye, we don't know the difference between the virtuous practices and negative practices, and thus we encounter all the failings, countless failings. This morning I was reading another verse from 400 verses where Arya Deva says, if you achieve nirvana, or if you do practice for achieving nirvana, there's not much to do. It's very moving. But if you carry the ordinary way of living in the samsara, there's so many things to do. But this was very interesting, because those of us who are not familiar with the practice, we might think, oh, practice is so difficult, we need to do this, do that, read this, read that, do this meditation, that meditation, things like that. But this text says, when you are without any action, without any action, you will transcend suffering. By doing, you will fall into the samsara. By doing means all the things that you, out of anger, jealousy, attachment, all this countless negative emotions, you become slave to the dictates of all these countless negative emotions. Therefore, you need to run to the north and east and the south, and go by train, metro, whatever, from early morning till late night. Nowadays our teacher pandemic, this virus has confined us. Otherwise, we know how busy we are, how much running we do hither and thither. We all know this. This running, endless running, is done because of the dictates of the negative emotions. And not only we keep on running, but there's no end to this running, because it's all propelled by the negative emotions. But when you develop this virtuous paths, practices, compassion, loving kindness, you will reach a state where you will stop unnecessary running after many of these useless things I'm saying, right? So that is the purpose of the Dharma practice, that you use your great, wonderful human intelligence to those which is, in the long run, beneficial to you, beneficial for others. Don't misuse this precious human mind to petty things, small things. In many cases, those things which animals can also do, right? Let me give you an example. For example, catwalk. Catwalk is imitation of cat, right? So there are many things we just do. I mean, this may sound a little bit cynical for many people who live different ways of life than the life we lead. But seriously, I've started thinking that even the system of education that we have today, many of these educations, that is the so-called education that is taught, is not much meaningful. It's another distraction. We really need to think and plan very, very carefully, with the books that you, or the things that you ask your kids to do. It should not become just another distraction, especially if you think about many of these things that are supplied to the kids. It's only another way of just passing the time, getting distracted. Yes, the children need, colorful books and things like that, but there could be many other ways. For example, the other day I was reading a little bit from Vinoba Bhave, who says these days you teach about horse in a book, in a page, horse or cows or whatever you teach in the page of a book. He said, why don't you take them to the living horse and cow and show it, rather than trying to teach about horse and cow in a book, you see, which is really true. So there are many ways of making life meaningful and also enriching, and also get the proper knowledge, right? So therefore, in the Buddhist practice of mindfulness and meditation, distraction is a big, obstruction. I told you some days back, I told you about this teacher who asked his student, "Are you studying?" And he said, "Yes, I'm studying." You'll remember this. He said, "Yes, I'm studying." Then he said, "How can you say you are studying? Because in the night you are sleeping, which means half of your life, and in the day you eat and walk around and then remain distracted. So when do you get time to practice?" So it's something like that, you see. So many of this, of course, we cannot become good practitioner or even enlightened in one day, but if we are more serious, then we need to focus more on what is important than those which is less important, right? So in that case, even the food you take, even the exercise that you do, all this should be targeted towards energizing that practice, so that this doesn't become just another distraction, you see. It's very, very important. Okay. So therefore, basically he's saying that we are suffering today because we don't have the wisdom eye. We are like a blind person, right? So it is because of this, people don't like you, because of your ignorance, and also you lose your peace and happiness. So therefore, this is the time now you roll up the cloth of ignorance, right? And make sure that it's not solid. Because this precious human life is a life where you can develop that pure morality, through which you can achieve complete freedom, complete liberation. Now, when we talk about complete liberation, it's a concept not easy to understand. But this should be understood just by comparing your life when you had no access to these teachings, and now today. If you compare, you will notice, happily, you will notice that yes, there is a big difference. If you don't compare like that, you may not know, because we have this tendency of measuring our success in terms of solid objects. You work very hard for the whole month. At the end of the month, you get the money which you can actually touch and count. Spiritual practice is not like that. But if you compare the way the way you used to think, the way you used to deal with other people, compare that with today, you will find that there's a huge difference. So that's important. Then we will know that we are making progress, that my life is happier, not necessarily in terms of money, but you are really, really happier and flourishing. I tell you this story of one Western nun some years back. She came to me one day to my office and she said, Geshe-la, I've been trying my best to practice, but I'm not able to achieve much success. What should I do? I told her, go back to your country. It was a little bit like rude or blunt, right? I said that with a purpose. Not necessarily because of what I said, but somehow she went back to her country. Then after a while, she came back and she came to see me and said, Geshe-la, thank you. Then I said, why? She said that when I came to your office and asked, I'm not making much progress, what should I do? You said, go back to your country. So I thought that was blunt, or I could not understand what it meant. But when I went to my country and compared my life to the way of the life people are leading, she said, I'm already advanced practitioner. Because she was clearly able to say, why the hell people are doing like this, right? And it is because of ignorance. We don't know. We are doing so many destructive, negative things, but we are not even aware that we are doing this. We take it as a usual way of life. That is the problem, you see. So therefore, it's important to have that awareness, the recognition of the effects of the good things. The other day, I was reading an article where it says people who mistreat others and do bad things to other people, they're actually mentally unsound. I mean, that was very powerful for me. A person who is mentally sound should not and cannot think about unnecessarily harming others, creating misery upon other people, right? Just as you would not do that for yourself intentionally. So therefore, the point that I'm making is, unless we remove ignorance of all forms, and then, of course, the fundamental ignorance of seeing things as having inherent existence, it will not be possible for us to develop the proper states of enlightenment. The various stages of enlightenment will not be able to cultivate that. So it's very, very important, as much as possible, fight with these negative emotions in general, and especially the three poisons, and especially the ignorance, which is the root. I mean, for example, if you want to cut a poisonous tree, so instead of cutting the tree from the root, if you just chop some leaves and branches, it may help you a little bit, but not much. The leaves will come again. So therefore, it is important to really try to cut the root, which simply said means that when we see things as having independent existence, that is ignorance, right? So when we see things as having independent existence, then there is an object towards which we must develop obsessive attachment. Then there's another object we should completely shun, right? Reject. So that's the problem. So if you change that attitude a little bit, there's nothing existing from its own side, positive or negative, It's all like imputation, designation. Then that will really, really help you at least relax the hold on that ignorance a little bit. So that is the process, right? And it looks like, I don't have the experience, but it looks like once you develop that very fine insight into that shunyata, then you're completely in a different state. As I said the other day, then you don't see any of these unnecessary divisions in this way, that way. These are divisions, are just labels, just names, And you are able to see that the cohesiveness, the unity, the harmony, you see. And it's based on that understanding of harmony and being able to live in harmony that you become whole, that you are able to develop that happiness and peace. So it's like that. So therefore, and it is because of this ignorance, then you develop the three poisons also: attachment, hatred, and then ignorance, which propels you into the samsara. Now, the attachment that is depicted by sometimes by a parrot or sometimes by a cock. Here in this case, it talks about a cock. So that cock is depicted, because if you look at the nature of that cock, although that cock is confused, ignorant, but to its object of desire and attachment, it also has excessive kind of contaminated love because of confusion. That cock does not know what is pure, what is impure, and it will pick up the grains, the burnt out, seeds thrown here and there, and also the mucus, and give it to the hen, not to others. So that attachment is like that. And then without any satisfaction, engage in excessive desire. And because of aspiring only desire, he is unable to develop this impartial love towards everybody, but this love, partial love, which is actually attachment to its partner or the hen only. And because of this obsessive attachment, there is no sense of embarrassment, no sense of benefiting others, and we look after only that the friend, and so forth. And when others coming close to that hen, he will become angry and try to drive the other cocks away and things like that. This is something that we all see. So that's why this example is given here. And it is because of this bondage, one goes to negative state of existence. And it's because of this attachment that you get so obsessed with your spouse that people who are more kind to you than your spouse, like your father and mother, you'll forget. Your teacher and others who have been very kind to you, you will forget. And you will concentrate on that husband or that wife because there is more excessive attachment. So in this way, you get stuck into this mud of attachment. So let us now cross that mud. Get out of this mud of attachment. Briefly speaking. Then the third animal depicted is snake, which symbolizes hatred. People who are hateful are like snake. In one's own case, whenever you are hurt or when you have a problem, you will try to lick medicine. You want to get medicine. But for other people, like the snake, you will throw the venom, the poison, because of hatred. So this example of snake is also perfect. So hatred is also like a big mud where you can get stuck. And these are all rooted primarily because of the self-cherishing attitude. And because of this hatred, if you have the power, you will try to kill others. If you don't have the power, then you will try to catch them or snatch from them or beat them. In this way, you destroy the whole world. I'm just translating just few verses, This is a long explanation. Few verses I'm trying to explain. So it says, you will end up destroying the world. That's what we are seeing today. The conflicts waged by few short-sighted, misguided so-called leaders are bringing all this conflict and fighting and killing because of hatred, negative emotions. And he says, if you don't have the power, then you will just backbite and saying bad things against that country, that person, and so forth. And one of the genius kind of method that hateful people will do is try to segregate, try to divide people. I mean, in politics, we know that. Two Mongolians, two Mongolia, two Korea, two Germany, divide and rule. We have that in the history. So this is exactly what he says here. So therefore, it is important to cross this mud or quagmire of hatred also. Then in the picture of the three animals, the animal depicted is pig. Pig symbolizes confusion and ignorance. And pig has the habit of not moving into beautiful meadows and green grasses. He will not fancy in those clean places, but he will enjoy the dirt, enjoy visiting the places which are dirty, and then he will scavenge in the dirt and really releases whatever he's able to find from those trashes. So these are all rooted in obsessive attachment. So it's important for us to get out of this. So this is what I want to explain briefly. And in the 12 links of dependent origination, ignorance is compared to blind old women. Action is compared to a potter. Consciousness is compared to a monkey. And the name and form compared to a boat. And the senses are compared to an empty house. And contact is represented by two people kissing. And the feeling is represented by a picture of a person whose eye is struck by an arrow. And then craving is like drinking, represented by drinking wine. Grasping is taking fruits from a tree. And then existence is represented by a pregnant woman. And then the birth is represented by the birth of a child. And then aging and death is represented by corpse being carried by people. So anyway, so the 12 links of dependent origination, I think you all know the ignorance, action, consciousness. Consciousness should be understood as of two types. One is called the causal consciousness. Another is the consciousness during the fruit time. So that means your life in this world come into existence primarily because of ignorance. Because of ignorance, you commit an action. Now, when we talk about being born in the samsara cycle existence, then that action is contaminated action or negative action. And then an imprint is left of this negative emotion on the mind, which is the causal mind, causal consciousness. And then from there, the name and form, the contact, the senses, the contact, and then because of the contact, then craving, then that intensified craving is grasping. And then that grasping is fully empowered, ready to produce next rebirth, that is called existence, because the word existence basically means life. The life that is going to give in the future life, that name is given to this cause, which is fully empowered. And then from there comes actual birth and aging and death, like this. So these 12 links of dependent origination, the cycle of these 12 links of dependent origination can be completed in 2 lifetimes. In 1 lifetime, you can probably complete the let us divide this 12 links of dependent origination into 4 classes. What is called as projecting cause, projected fruit, actualizing cause, and actualizing fruit. So in one lifetime, if you accumulate all the projecting causes and actualizing causes, then in the next life, you can fulfill the remaining one, that is the projected fruit and actualized fruit. So that is how the 12 links of dependent origination, the cycle can be completed in 2 lifetimes. And it is said that the maximum it will take is 3 lifetimes, not more than that, in 3 lifetimes. Now, this is not easy. I'm just giving you a hint. We need to spend a lot of time to study. It's very complex. Because in the case of one life, or in the case of one person, at any length of time, any given time, we are performing so many different types of actions. Unthinkable. Even in one day, I don't know how many different types of actions we perform and how many different types of imprints are left on the mind. Now the question is, when you have done so many actions, negative actions, positive actions, contaminated actions, how can you ensure which of these causes, these karmas, can give their fruit first? Right? So it's a complex. So in the text, roughly it says that which of the actions you have done recently, there's a likelihood of it producing fruit first. But if there are similar actions which you have done recently, then among them, the heavier ones and things like that, whichever karma is more heavy, things like that. The first heavy one and then the recently done one, things like that, right? So in one lifetime, what I'm trying to say is, in one lifetime, I might have, because of ignorance, I might accumulate an action which will in some future lifetime produce the birth of a dog. The story doesn't end there. I might also perform an action which might produce a human being. I might accumulate another action which might produce, which might leave an imprint to give birth to an elephant. So many karmas, you see, both in a positive sense and negative sense, it is possible, right? So when we reverse this 12 links of dependent origination, in other words, remove ignorance, then the fruit of that ignorance, which is the contaminated action, can be removed, and that's how you get liberated also. So both the pure class and the impure classes are there. So it's very, very intricate. So it's luckily there are a number of books. There's one book here by His Holiness. If you are interested, it's available. And I'm sure there are many books. So do read those books, which may not completely clarify all the doubts. It's very, very complex, but it's really, really a subject which we must spend a lot of time, because this will help us. How are we get entrapped in the samsara, and how can we get out of the samsara? There's the main question, right? Okay. So as I was saying, that the main point that is repeatedly explained here is the attachment, the desire. Run away from the place of attachment. Run away from the place of attachment. As I said the other day, sometimes, even if you turn your head, if there is a place of attachment, a beautiful car or whatever, then you just turn away. Don't look at that. It will help you remove that attachment. Sometimes it is as easy as that, right? Because we run after the sensual objects, and sensual objects are there. So unless you restrain your mind, control your mind, there's no way you can remove those attachments. So what happens is, when you develop attachment to a particular object, And let us say you are able to own that fancy object. And by enjoying that object, you are able to drive some kind of satisfaction and peace and happiness. Then that further fuels that attachment. Then you want to have that more. This is how we have craving and grasping, which basically means addiction. Right? First, it's your mind which says, oh, it looks nice. The chocolate really looks nice. Let us taste it. When you really taste it, then it turns out to be like delicious to your tongue. It depends which tongue, because for me, I don't like the black chocolate. They say it is very good for your health, but I don't like that. I like the milk chocolate, which just melts on the tongue, things like that. So different taste. But what I'm saying is when you taste it, then because it is delicious, now if you are somebody who has control, yeah, it's delicious, but I should not indulge. You may be able to do that. You may be able to stop it. But for many, no, it's so delicious, I can't stop it. This is how you get addicted. Be it tea, be it a chocolate, be it a coffee. Just be honest with your life, and you will see you are addicted in so many things. Not necessarily addiction, not necessarily mean completely destructive, but it might destroy you, right? So see those addictions. So this is how you get stuck. This is how you get stuck. This is how many people get bankrupt. How many people get problems because of obsession in one thing. When you get obsessed with one thing, as the example given here, you get stuck with that quagmire of mud. Getting stuck means you're not able to get out of it. Both of your feet get stuck in the mud. And the text says when your feet, is stuck in the mud, you extend your hand to help it. And in the process, your hands also get stuck there. So now you're completely immobile. And then you'll die. So it's exactly like that. So because what we are trying to pursue is freedom, right? Not getting stuck somewhere. So it is this negative emotion, especially desire. In today's world, it's desire, it is unchecked greed, which is bringing so many problems, including the environmental destruction, of course, out of ignorance. But the one which is really, really obvious is attachment. So therefore, he focuses on that. Run away from those places, which is source of attachment. And what is the best way to remove attachment is see, as I said earlier, the more you see the defects of that object, that person, that quality, the more you see the shortcoming, the more you will be able to get out of that attachment. And the best way of doing that is, there are many, many ways of seeing the shortcomings, but one of the best ways, see the transient, impermanent nature of that object. In Buddhist philosophy, we talk about two types of phenomena, permanent and impermanent phenomena, right? Permanent phenomena is okay. It will not make you much problem. It's the impermanent phenomena, the conditioned phenomena, which is the source of our problem, because we need to deal with all these conditioned things, the sensual objects, things like that, right? So therefore, however seemingly attractive, beautiful those sensual objects are, they are transient. Transient. Transient means transient. Fleeting. It may not be there tomorrow also. The one that you are so fond of may not be there tomorrow also. So what will you do? How will you be able to cope with that? Number one, this is one way of thinking. The second way is, as I said earlier, to make a distinction between love and attachment. When you love somebody, genuinely loving kindness, when you develop genuine loving kindness, you have respect for that person. You will take the best maximum care of that person, but you don't get stuck with that person. You don't tie your head with that person. So you are almost maintaining that social distancing, physical distance. And because of that, you are in the best position to help that person when that person is in need. But when you tie your head with that person, when he cries, you also cry. When he is immobile, you are also immobile. Then how are you going to help it? Right? So therefore, make a clear distinction between loving kindness and attachment. Attachment comes because you like that person, you love that person because that person belongs to me, my husband, my wife, my brother, my sister. Loving kindness doesn't say that. Loving kindness says I must love this person because he or she is like me, wanting happiness, not wanting suffering. This is the reason. So you can see how much flexibility, freedom there with genuine loving kindness. Externally, it might even look that that person is not caring about that person, you see, because you don't have that usual, marks of attachment, When you have the usual marks of attachment, then you need to physically touch and hug and this and that, right? So with the loving kindness, physical distancing is also important, right? In the 12 links of dependent origination, one of the member was contact. Contact in general is important, right? But the contact or touch, the same touch to a person with love, loving kindness, and the same touch to the person with attachment is totally different. Totally different. So here, when we talk about contact, then that contact is alloyed with this negative emotion. So that brings problem, right? So therefore, meditate on impermanence. As a reminder, I must tell you, I said this several times before, that one of the first teaching that the Buddha gave us on impermanence, and one of the last teaching that he gave us on impermanence. And Buddha was clearly saying, unless you properly and thoroughly meditate on impermanence, there is no way you can make a move towards spiritual practice. And that's not just reading about the book, but understanding the fragility, the impermanent nature. But also, I told you, impermanence doesn't mean destruction and death alone, right? Impermanence basically means change. Impermanence also means flexibility. Because of this flexibility, you can become better, you can become worse. So the choice is yours. Possibilities are there, right? So therefore, the meditation impermanence is to empower you to do the good thing and to discourage you to stop to all the destructive things, right? So therefore, remember impermanence and instigate yourself to come out of that quagmire of attachment and recall that your body and your mind is like the floating clouds in the sky. If you look at the floating batches of clouds in the space, at one moment they're all coming together, gliding peacefully, looking nice. We might take some photos also. The next moment it's gone. So our existence, our coming together is like the coming together of the clouds. And without understanding that, if you get stuck with that quagmire of mud, then whatever you do will not be very beneficial. For example, he says there are people who have that arrogance, the pride of being a Dharma practitioner, who are arrogant as a Dharma practitioner, but do not know the real teaching. Then there are people who feign and pretend that they meditate on loving kindness, but instead they end up developing attachment. As I told you, make a distinction between these two. And then there are people who have this desire to remove attachment, but while doing so, they produce hatred. There are people who try to make an attempt to eliminate hatred. In that process, they become confused and ignorant, develop ignorance. And then there are people who are encouraged to meditate on ugliness, right? To be able to meditate on impermanence or to remove that attachment. because the antidote to attachment is to see the shortcomings and ugliness of that object. But then unfortunately, when you do the wrong meditation, by meditating on ugliness, you develop hatred to that person, to that object. So there may be facsimile loving kindness and compassion, which may be actually attachment. There may be facsimile practice of equanimity, but it may actually be ignorance. There may be facsimile kind of joy, but which may actually maybe arrogance. So this is all because of your not knowing properly what is ignorance, what is confusion. There are people who supposed to be observing morality, but while doing so, they develop self-importance. That I'm somebody who is doing this practice for so long, so I'm special, So that's why you see some of the sadhus so arrogant. And we are scared of approaching the sadhu, saying that they will recite some black magic and black mantra, you see, which is actually shameful. They are spiritual practitioners. We should be happy to to see them, to receive their blessing. But instead, we are scared of the wrath that we might earn from the sadhus, right? So if you end up in different forms, developing all these negative emotions, then the problem is you will lose your freedom and you will be involuntarily taken away by the Lord of the Death. If such things happen, then your future is not very secure, right? So it's important to make a proper planning. And then so therefore here to kind of wrap up, to conclude, the best method to remove the ignorance of course is meditation on emptiness. I've explained this point many times and I'm sure you know very well, but here is an example given from the sutra itself, where we are encouraged to see things like a dream. There are many teachings which say to the phenomena which is like an illusion, contemplate on them as an illusion, meditate on them as an illusion, and you will get enlightened as an illusion. Similarly, this phenomena, which if you see the phenomena as a dream and think about them as a dream, meditate on them as a dream, you get enlightened as a dream, and so forth. There are many stanzas like that. So what it is basically saying, let us take the example of the dream. Actually, I mentioned this earlier also. In the dream, for example, if tonight, if you get a dream of winning how much you want, many billions of dollars, when you're sleeping and dreaming peacefully and you won big lottery, some famous American lotteries have come to India. I read it in a newspaper. So if you win such a big lottery while you're dreaming, then while you're dreaming, you enjoy. Yes, so lucky, I have so much money, you might even bring some smile on the face, even though your head is on the pillow, right? So you're enjoying because you're dreaming. It's okay. You're dreaming. Not realizing that this is not true, you're enjoying. But when you wake up, it's only when you wake up, you realize that forget about billions of dollars, you don't have even 1 pence, 1 coin, small coin. And you realize that it was just a dream. And you might say, I wish it was not a dream, it's a real thing. But at the same time, you know this is a dream, so I should not feel too sad or too dejected, right? It was a dream. And you might laugh at it and see it as a fun, I got this dream, That's the example, beautiful example. So similarly, the experiences that we are having in this life, the life that we are living now, is also another form of a dream, in the sense that things appear and have no independent existence. Things are like what appears on a television screen, as I said earlier. It's really like a dream. If you still don't understand that, then take this example of what you've experienced during your past lives. For example, if you are a young woman of 30 years old, then think about those experiences that you experienced during the past 30 years, and think about those ups and downs, those laughings, and those cryings, those meetings and those partings, and 100,000 things have happened. 30 years is a long time, right? But if you try to recall that 30 years long experience today, it is just a memory. It is not different from the dream that you had last night. It is only a memory. So in the remaining of our life, also things will go like that. So what is there to, develop too much grasping? That's what he's saying. Right? So therefore, now we are not awake. We are ordinary people. We are dreaming in this so-called life or living. We are dreaming. And there are things that we must enjoy. There are things we must fight with, and things like so many things to grapple with. But for the highly enlightened bodhisattvas and Buddhas, they are laughing at us. I mean, not mocking. They may be smiling or something like that, saying, "My children, you see, they are unnecessarily suffering." And I give this example, which is given from the 400 verses by Aryadeva. He gives the examples of kids playing by the seashore, building sand castles. One kid builds a nice sand castle, another naughty kid comes and gives a kick to that sand castle and dismantles it. And then the one who built it feels so miserable and sad, as if a real castle has been destroyed, because that child doesn't have that knowledge of what is real castle and things like that. So the slightly experienced elderly parents and others will come and then console the child by saying, "Don't cry, don't feel sad. This is just and this is not the real castle. I'll give you a toy which is better than this," and things like that, right? So just like that, just like this castle, this innocent kids suffer unnecessarily, not knowing that the sand castle is a real castle, right? So similarly, we are experiencing that, and the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who see the reality, they feel very sorry how we are suffering. So that is why people like His Holiness, they say we are much of the time we are suffering unnecessarily. And you can stop many of these unnecessary sufferings just by changing your attitude and seeing the things as they are, seeing things as just another dream. It will go, it will come and go. So that's why in the Dzogchen practice, it says, just be an observer of the arisal and going away of your emotions. Just be an observer, and don't follow the mind. Don't follow the emotions. And I read about this 30 line from the 37 Bodhisattva practices, where Tongme Sangpo, he mentions that by perceiving the mistaken appearances as true, we get tired. Because when we chase the object is endless. How much you are going to chase? There will never be a time when you will say, "I have all the things that I want." Even in the case of this mobile phone or refrigerator, the clever people, they are updating these gadgets every time. And if you don't have this contentment, and if you have only unchecked greed, then you need all these so-called updated things. There's the problem. I said this before. There's the problem. And we forget updating oneself, and very, very fond of the so-called updated object outside. So there's the problem. So there will never be an end to your running. And the running means not stopping. Not stopping means having no peace of mind, no tranquility of mind, because you are chasing what is outside. You are never going inside. So therefore, it is really, really important to go inside there is a Dzogchen teaching called making the mind take rest. Making the mind take rest. Meaning that the more you go inside and reflect within means really like reflecting on the whole space. That's the nature of the mind. When you go inside, although we say inside, but the inside, the nature of the mind is so much, it's so expansive that it's not restricting, it is not constricting. It's like the space, like the sky. So there you find peace. There you find genuine relaxation. But instead, if you change the object, the concrete object, just like the shape and color of the object, your mind also becomes something like, that concrete object, right? So therefore, the example that is given here, which I've already explained, in the sutra, it gives an example of a young woman who gets a dream of giving birth to a son. So she was very happy, very pleased. Then she gets a second dream of the death of the child, and she feels miserable. But when she wakes up, she realized that both of this happiness that she experienced with the birth of the child and the death of the child doesn't make sense. So it's like that. So therefore, understanding the ultimate reality or shunyata, or even impermanence, of course, understanding shunyata is very, very important, but it has to be done. If you are not so comfortable with that, then do the step-by-step practice. First, you meditate a little bit on impermanence, right? And then impermanence of your life. And then because of that, how suffering is produced. And then this person who himself or herself, if you look at the nature of this person, himself or herself, you realize that this so-called person, which wants happiness, which do not want suffering, also does not have inherent independent existence. So therefore, you, of all types of emptiness, you primarily think about the impermanence of oneself. That's much more related to you than the emptiness or selflessness of other phenomena. And of course, gradually you need to think about the selflessness of other phenomena also. All right, so I stop here today. If there are some questions, please ask.
So, Gishla, thank you so much. We already have two people very patiently waiting. So, Nili, you can go first, please. I just sent you unmute request.
Okay. Hello.
Mm-hmm. Shalom. Shalom,
Hi.
shalom.
I just wanted to, I thought about, you see, when we are creating something, and it doesn't matter if you're an author, writing a book, or, a painter, or a teacher, or even giving, like a medical treatment to someone. When we are in this process and we really want to do something which is meaningful and say for the benefit of others, it's quite obvious that we have in the process to remove ourselves or our ego or ourself, from the thing. I mean, being really immersed, I would say, in the thing itself and not in our benefits from it and all of that. But then my question is, once you did it and, people like it, people enjoyed the book, I don't know, enjoyed the teaching, enjoyed the building you did design, whatever, that's fine. But then say you're an author and, the publisher takes the book and deletes 2 chapters from the book, which you really think, in a very, I would say, in a real way, that really that will violate, the whole spirit or the whole meaning of what, of the book. But in that sense, you could say, okay, now jumps the attachment. I mean, how can you really go on with, or you don't have to, I don't know, remove yourself from that case. I don't know how, if I explained it in.
Mm-hmm. You need to make a distinction between conventionally existent self and independently existent self. Even Buddha talks about at that point of time, I was there, I did these things like that. So just mentioning I as a conventional thing, there's no problem with that. It may be related to your bow or your construction or your painting, whatever. I did this. And did you really enjoy? Okay, like that, that's okay. But then if you start thinking that many people are following me, so I'm something very special and things like that, then that is wrong. It is wrong. So therefore, it is important to make sure that you don't become, arrogant with your achievement, your quality, whatever. Sometimes we have this habit of unnecessarily, bragging about our small achievement. So therefore, in Buddhism, we say that the praises towards yourself should be allowed for other people to talk about it. Your job is not praising about yourself, but finding more of your shortcomings, as you mentioned. If there is something wrong in the book, then you acknowledge. There is not a big issue. We all make mistakes, but it's important to recognize the mistake as a mistake, and then should have the courage to say, yes, it was a mistake. Sorry, I will rectify it next time, whether it's a book or your life or whatever. So that is the process. So unless you have some kind of humility, whatever is your present achievement, unless you have some kind of humility, there is not much room for further growth. So that is actually very, very important in our life, right? Okay.
Natasha? Natasha, hi, can you, okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Geshe. As usual, I have questions from our Russian audience, and I must say that we have 4 questions. If we have time for some of them, will be great. I will start with the first one, which is actually a follow-up from one of the previous sessions. The person, if you remember, asked about how the phenomena that are not still known to people exist if all the phenomena are designated by the mind. So the follow-up question is that there are most subtle particles. I understand that the most subtle particles that probably the scientists didn't discover yet, and henceforth they are not yet designated by the mind. How do they exist in this case?
How can we say that it is existent? There's the question. So you can't say it is existent because you don't know. The only way to say whether anything is existent or not is whether it has been cognized or measured by a valid mind or not. So it is, if so long as it is not measured, how can you say it is existent? You can't say. So the question itself is really like the answer for that person, There's no way you can say that it's existent. How can you explain it?
So, am I correct in the understanding, since the person is on YouTube and cannot ask any follow-up questions? So, if something exists, it is designated by the mind, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
yeah. And
exactly.
if there is something which you suppose exists,
yeah. So how can you know? Suppose. How can you suppose?
Okay, well, I hope that that answered the question. The next one is
once I met somebody who said, we had a lot of arguments. There's somebody many years back when I was a student in the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, there was an educated young Indian lady. She said, when she closes her eye, nothing is there.
Okay, Geshe, thank you very much. And the next question is, how can we get firmly established in the natural state of non-dual emptiness?
Through persistent practice, through knowledge. So it's like practice. The easiest example that I can give is the example that I already gave before. If you have somebody, if you have an enemy, who you used to get terrified just by hearing the name, forget about meeting that person. But the circumstance compelled that this dreaded enemy became your neighbor, next door neighbor. So how are you going to live with that person? You're terrified. First few nights you may not get a wink of sleep. But then there's no other way. But you are because of the circumstances, he became your neighbor. So, and it's also not easy for you to move. If the situation is something like that, then you have to stay there. So the first few nights or few days very difficult, but then gradually you have to venture out, and you cannot avoid that person all the time. So it also happens that you see that person occasionally, but still you refuse to look at that person. You refuse to talk that person. But with frequently seeing each other, something happens, then at least that person starts nodding his head, or you also start nodding your head, which is a welcome contact. And then gradually you might smile a little bit, and then gradually you might pull courage to say, how are you? And then gradually you start talking a little bit more. And then gradually you invite that person to your home for a cup of tea. And then gradually you become such a close friend that the same enemy whose name even you don't want to hear, now you become such a close friend that you are not happy in the absence of this person, even for a short time. So making friendship with emptiness is like that. It may be difficult. Emptiness means, if you think properly, emptiness basically means things don't exist independently. It's easier said than done. But when we say things don't exist independently, for us, it is almost shattering all our ordinary belief, because we are used with this belief of seeing things as concrete, something to fight with, something to grapple with, something to love with. You see, if this is not there, it's not charming. You see, it's only by name, designation. There's no charm. So it's really like shattering our old belief. But when you think more about it, taking the example of what appears on the television screen or rainbow and things like that, and then the efficacy of such practice, then gradually you will understand it's important and will be able to stay in that state for a long time. It's all question of practice and habit and conviction, of course. Yeah.
Mhm. Thank you very much, Geshe. And the next question is, when we do practice high in the mountains, it's very different from doing practice in the big cities with many neighbors around you, etc.
Yes.
And keeping love and compassion is very important, but isn't it just as important to stop people from vices, non-virtuous acts, etc.?
Both are important, but in the Buddhist teaching it says, unless you yourself is disciplined, you cannot hope to discipline other people, right? So therefore, in order to really be able to help others, first you should reach some state and get those required qualities, not just in terms of talking, but in terms of your living life, that people can feel that vibration. People can get affected by your genuine presence, like His Holiness, we call it presence, Kundun, which means presence, His very presence is something, So that takes time. So therefore, many of the Kadamba teachers, for the beginners, they give the advice, don't keep on staying in one place, accumulating negative emotions. And in the same text, you remember we read earlier that those places which invokes, which produces more negative emotions, that place is not good for you to stay. Go to, not necessarily to mountain. Mountain is another example, but go to those places where your practice, which will be more congenial for your practices, right? Then also, like when you move to the mountain, also there are many ways of doing it. Don't get excited and move to an isolated place, which in the beginning looks good, but later on you'll find it is infested with all kind of ferocious animals, things like that. So you need to take into consideration everything. Depends on your level of practice. Yeah.
Yes, and thank you very much. And the last question we got today is about the difference between affection and love. if the people close to you require an active display of emotions, and you don't display such emotions, and they think that you grew cool towards them, right? What to do in this case?
That's what I said earlier, the difference between loving kindness and attachment, right? Attachment needs all the physical marks of attachment, right? So that you need hugging and touching and this and that, all those kind of things. And especially we have a modern culture where, as you rightly mentioned, you don't do those things, then people think, oh, he's not loving me anymore, you see. So you need what is known as the romantic love. That's what people are expecting, you see. So what I'm saying is, what is most important is you should not, right in the beginning, there's no need for you to pretend that you're on a higher plane and don't respond to other people's love. You respond to other people's love. There's no problem. But at the same time, make sure that you don't get stuck with that kind of obsessive attachment. For example, look, you see the difference between the cat cuddling and hugging of a father or mother to a young kid, and then the hugging of two grown-up people with obsessive attachment. You see the difference between there. You see, the child feels the real love from the father and from mother because it's much more less alloyed with attachment. There is attachment, of course, but much less alloyment. But in the case of grown-up people like husband, wife, and things like the boyfriend, girlfriend, then there is that much more presence of attachment. So therefore, we have this, what we call as love-hate relationship. One moment, love. Next moment, he is not responding. He is not responding. So hated, divorce, all these things, you see? Right? But you can explain. You may have more experience than me. Okay.
Thank you, Geshe Lhakdor. Geshe Lhakdor, we have two more questions.
Yes.
Okay, great. So Jackie, hi Jackie, can you unmute yourself? Okay.
Hello, thank you for your teaching. I was wondering, this is from a bit ago, but it's relevant because when you were comparing the aggregate to items, you mentioned that karmic formations or actions were like a plantain or banana tree, and I didn't quite understand that at the time and still don't. Thank you.
Potter. Action is compared to a potter.
Potter. Oh.
Yeah, one who makes pot. Because when you make the pot, you need a lot of action,
Then what was compared to a plantain? Well, I'll go back.
Which one?
Plantain tree or banana tree?
I did not say it this time.
Like there were okay, sorry. I'll
normally in the Buddhist text, our life in samsara is compared to like a plantain tree or banana tree. So it could be also like not just banana tree, it could also be like onion, So the banana tree or onion is, you take the external peel, there's one inside, take that out, there's another one, take that out. In the end, there is no essence, you don't find anything. So therefore, the samsara itself is like, what we do in the samsara is explained like a banana tree. Not much essence. You do this, you do that, but there's not much essence. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. And now we have Lata Sonpa. Lata ji, yeah.
Namaste, Geshe-la.
Namaste, Lata ji.
You mentioned that when there is an attachment, then we need to focus on the negatives of the person to let go of the attachment.
Negative or shortcoming, yeah, false, yeah.
But then we are focusing on the negatives. I was having difficulty with the focusing on negatives on other people. So I didn't know how to phrase it and ask you about it. It's just that I thought that letting go of attachment means we have to work on ourselves rather than focus on others.
No, but when we develop attachment to other people, not just yourself.
No, that's what I was saying.
You develop attachment to people, you develop attachment to object, not just yourself. So what I'm saying is, I'm just giving you the example. So whether you're developing attachment to yourself or to other people, to an object, to stop that attachment, you need to think about the shortcomings and faults of that object, that person, including yourself. By that, I am not saying you should see that person as a whole, negative. I'm not saying that. Just to help you reduce your attachment, you think about the shortcomings or faults of that other person. So that will help you reduce your attachment. So if the object can be anybody, other people, yourself, any other object, right? For example, if you're very proud of like your voice, then you in order to reduce that arrogance, you might start thinking about, your other imperfections, just to reduce that negative emotion. And that is not to say that because of that you are completely negative or completely perfect, things like that. It's only a balancing tactic. Okay.
Geshe-la,
Yeah.
are there other ways of letting go of attachment? Because when we start focusing on other people's negatives, that will generate negative feelings, including maybe dislike and hatred. And so can we not let go of the attachment without focusing on negatives?
You can of course, use other methods also. But for example, if there is a method better than this, you can do that also. For example, now because you raised this question, if you are developing attachment to other person, that is always possible, right? So how would you reduce that attachment?
Well, by focusing on impermanence.
That's what I read already.
Right.
So that impermanence.
Instead of focusing on their negatives, focus on impermanence and everything.
You are using a different word.
Okay.
I don't remember using the word negative. It can also be used, but I was primarily using the word their shortcomings or their faults. So their being impermanent is also a shortcoming.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, Geshe-la, thank you so much, Geshe-la, for this session, and we look forward to the next one. Okay. And Geshe-la, we have started meeting after you leave, like for a little bit of Sangha meeting of sorts. But today we'll have to postpone it to the next session. So everyone who were looking forward to this session, we'll meet again in the next session. Sure. It's already a wee bit late. So have a good time, everyone. And thank you so much, Geshe-la. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And Nonzilla, get well.
Thank you, Geshe-la. I already feel better.